Today's daf, Bezras Hashem, is Masechta Menachos Daf Mem Hey 45, and we will begin from Daf Mem Dalet Amid Beis by the Mishnah. So the Mishnah begins. The Mishnah says, when you have a situation, a holiday, a yontif, that requires you to bring karbonos tzibur, and the karbonos tzibur include parim, cows, elim, rams. Ram, by the way, is basically a sheep that's 13 months old, a male sheep, v'akvasim, and a sheep that's lower than within the year. So let's take an example. The Torah tells us on Sukkot, right? Any day of Sukkot, the Torah tells you, here is the Chumash, you're going to have the Psukim over here, that you should bring cows, 13 cows, 2 rams, and 14 sheep. So what the Mishnah is telling you, let's say you couldn't buy all the cows for that day. The cows fluctuate, by the way. The second day of Sukkot is 12 cows, and then the third day is 11 cows, etc. But the elim, rams, or sheeps, let's say there's a shortage. You could only afford, the Beis Hamikdash can only find 12 sheep, 12 cows, or 1 sheep, or 1 ram, or 10 sheep. Let's say they can't fill the quota of each group. So what should they do? Einam akvazazeh, it doesn't hold back. It's still good. It doesn't stop anything from happening. You could still bring whatever you can. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, Reb Shimon says, Im hayu lahem parim merubim, v'lohem nesachim. Here is an interesting case. If the Beis Hamikdash could only for some reason, there's a shortage of flour. Every cow, every carbon oila, you brought some offering, in addition, some flour offering on the Mizbeach, and you poured wine on the Mizbeach. Let's say, if you're going to use up your money, you can only buy cows, but no nesachim for the cows. So the Mishnah says, do one at least right. Yavi par echad, you bring 1 cow, unesachim, and it's carbon nesachim, the mincha and the wine that you pour on the mizbeach. Just don't buy cows without bringing the meal offerings. You're going to feed Hashem, so to speak, meat, so to speak. You got to also bring along the flour offering and the wine offering on the mizbeach. And if you're bringing if you're going to spend money on the cows and you're not going to have money for the nesachim, then bring less cows. That's basically what Reb Shimon is saying. So now the Gemara says like this: Hani param ukvasam dehecha. What are we talking about? Cows and sheeps and rams. If it's on the yontiv of Sukkot, and like I said, in the yontiv of Sukkot, the Torah tells you bring, let's say, 13 cows, 2 rams, and 14 sheeps. And if you're missing some of the cows in that group, or if you're missing some of the rams, or you're missing some of the sheep, it's also okay. That's not true. Because the Torah tells you by Sukkot, kemishpatam, where the Torah tells you that they all go together. You can't bring less of a number. Kemishpat means exactly the way it says. So it can't not be referring to Sukkot. Kemishpatam ksibahu. Ella, says the Gemara, the Rosh Chodesh v'atzeres the Chumash b'kudim. It's talking about Rosh Chodesh or Shavuos that's written in Parshas Pinchas. Let's go to Parshas. We have Parshas Pinchas, which we're familiar with this. We say this every Rosh Chodesh. So in Rosh Chodesh, you have Param b'nei bakar shnayim. A cow, by the way, is 3 years old. B'nei bakar means it's young, and it's robust. Shnayim, you bring 2 cows for an oila, 1 ram, and 7 sheep. So what the Mishnah is saying, that if you're missing one of the cows, or you're missing one of the sheep, let's say you only have 5 sheep or 6 sheep, that's also okay. Now, because they don't stop you from bringing whatever sheep you have. If you're missing a cow, it doesn't stop you from bringing the other cow. And then on Shavuos, in Chumash Parshas Pinchas, it says, for a carbon misuf on Shavuos, it says param shnayim. You bring 2 cows. Ayel echad 1 ram. and Shiva Kvasim and 7 sheeps. Very similar. So again, if you're missing some of the cow, one cow, bring just bring one cow. If you can't bring 2, bring 1. If you're missing, if you only have 6 sheep, bring 6. If that's what the Mishnah is saying, so then let's go to Amid Aleph. The Gemara says, Elim dahacha. What is the Mishnah saying? Rams. If you're missing one ram, bring the other ram. Idahani, if it's referring to Rosh Chodesh and Shavuos, the Ayalhu, they only have one ram. So what is the Mishnah saying? If you're missing one ram, bring the other ram. But in Rosh Chodesh and on Shavuos, the Musaf of Rosh Chodesh and Musaf of Shavuos has only one ram to it. And that Seres the Taurus Kahanim, here's something that's not well known. In the Chumash, it says in Parshas Emor, in Taurus Kahanim, which is the Sefer Vayikra, first the Torah tells you count 7 weeks and call it Shavuos. Okay. Then the Torah tells you this has nothing to do with the Musaf. The Torah is telling you, this is called the Shtei Lechem. You bring from wherever you live in Eretz Yisrael, you bring brand new breads. You make it chametz. There's massive challah, that you can in a bakery, separated for Hashem. Shtayim, both challahs should look exactly alike, and these are going to be like minchas that are going to be lifted, but they're not going to be brought on the mizbeach. They're going to do, they slice it up and give a piece to every kohen. You bring shtayim, shnei asroim soilos tiyana. Each one is a soren. Tiyana chametz tivana. Bake it as a chametz challah. Bikurim lashem. And then the Torah says, along with the shtei alechem, yikrafta ba'alechem shivas kvasim tmi ben b'nei shana upar echad. Here the Torah tells you for this shtei alechem, you bring 7 sheeps, 1 cow, and 2 rams. And then the Torah tells you, along with all that oilers, you bring 2 shalmei tzibers, which are called 2 extra sheeps for a shlomim. A shlomim sheep will be, part on the mizbeach, and part the kahanim are going to get. So the kahanim are going to get some bread, some challah bread, and they're also going to get some sheep meat. Okay, and then the Torah tells you, you make a tenufa, and that's kind. So, if we're referring to that, if you're missing one of the rams, bring the other ram, but that cannot be, because on this part of the service on Shavuos, the Torah says yiyu. You see over here yiyu. That means you have to bring them the way it is. You can't bring one ram without the other. So basically, how could the Torah tell you? How could the Mishnah say that if you're missing one ram, you can bring the other ram? So what is the pshat in the Mishnah regarding the rams? Says the Gemara, La'olam Dartzeres the Taurus Kahanim. It's referring to Shavuos. What the Torah is telling you, that the aisles, if you're missing one of these aisles on Parshas, what's written in Parshas Emor, which is in Vayikra, you could still bring the Musaf, which is written in Parshas. You could still bring this one aisle, because this is the Musaf. This is a totally different thing. This is not a Shtei Lechem carbon. These are the Musaf carbons on Shavuos. Shavuos is a very big day. You have Musaf, and you also have Shtei Lechem carbons, which is extra. Another. So they're different. They're different carbons. So the Mishnah is telling you that if you're missing some of the rams for this part of the service, you could still bring the rams that are for the Musaf. And if you're missing the Musaf ram, you could still do the Shtei Lechem rams. So they don't bother each other. So it says the Gemara, so the Mishnah is not congruent. Ella the Parim, by the case of the cows, it's talking about Rosh Chodesh, and it's talking about if you only have one cow, if you're supposed to bring 2 cows. If you're missing one cow of that pair, bring just 1 cow. So it's the same group. The Eli, the Hacho, who the Loy Ma'akve. And we're saying by rams, it's the opposite. One ram in one part of their service of the Musaf doesn't stop the rams of of the Shtei Alechem. The Shtei Alechem rams don't stop the Musaf rams. But inu ma'akvi, but within the group of the Shtei Alechem rams, one is stopping the other. If you just only have one ram by the Shtei Alechem rams, you don't makar of that one ram because it says you. So how does the Mishnah is not so congruent? And says Gemara, that's the way it is. Tana mili katani. The Tana is giving you the halachas, and that's the way the halachas are. So let's go back in the Mishnah, and then the rest of the Gemara is flies. The Mishnah says porem if you're missing some of the cows, v'hakvasim, or if you're missing some of the sheep. So that's referring to, let's say, Rosh Chodesh. Torah tells you bring 2 cows. If you only have 1 cow, they can't find another cow in all of Israel. Bring that 1 cow for Rosh Chodesh. Or kvasim, if they can only find 6 sheep, not 7, fine. That's the Einim Akvim. They don't stop you. And Elim, rams don't stop you, means that on Shavuos, where you're supposed to bring a pair of rams for the Shtei Alechem and 1 ram for the Musaf, if you're missing in each if just because you could afford 2 rams for the Shtei Alechem doesn't stop. If you're missing a ram for the Musaf, you could still bring the 2 rams for the Shtei Alechem and vice versa. So that's how it works in the Mishnah. Now, all this is based on psukim that are written in Yecheskel, where Yecheskel tells us new halachas that are not written in the Chumash. How do you know? Maybe the Torah meant that the Torah tells you on Shavuos that if you're missing 1 sheep, the whole thing is gone. How do you know that? So there you have to read the pasuk in Yecheskel. And Yecheskel says that in Rosh Chodesh you're going to bring 1 cow and 6 sheep and 1 tmimim. Par matamad loimer. Why does he say on Rosh Chodesh you bring 1 cow when our Chumash says you bring 2 cows on Rosh Chodesh, right? Parim shnei parim. What does it say by Rosh Chodesh? Takriva parim, 2 shnayim. So why did Yecheskel say 1? How do I know if you only find 1 cow, bring 1? Talmud Loime Par. That's why Yecheskel taught us 1. Shisha kvasim. Then Yecheskel tells us bring 6 sheep. Ma Talmud Loime. Why is he telling you bring 6 sheep when our Torah tells you bring 7? The Torah tells you bring 7 sheep. How do I know if you don't find 7 sheep, you should bring 6? Talmud Loime Shisha, bring 6. Let's say you can't find 6, you can only find 5. Or let's say you can't find 5, you could only find 4. Or let's say you can't find 4, but you could find 3 or 2, 1. Let's say you only find 1 sheep. Bring whatever sheep you could find. How do I know that if 1 is enough, then why does Yecheskel say bring 6? The Kama de'evshla durim madrinim. It's not 7 or 1. It's you try to get as much sheep as you possibly can to hit the number 7. But if you can get 6, get 6. Don't be lax about it and just say, oh, 1 is also okay. And how do I know each group is ma'akiv? In other words, Torah tells you bring 2 cows, 1 ram, and 7 sheep. Let's say I have 2 cows and 7 sheep. How do I know that if I don't have any cows, I can bring the sheep? The answer is they hold each other back. You need to have cows and sheep. If you just have cows and you don't have sheep, they stop you. Talmud Loime you. There, Yecheskel says it has to be that way. So even on Rosh Chodesh, you need to have at least a cow, a sheep, or a ram. But the Torah gives you numbers. But if you can't find them, it's also good. In Yecheskel, it says that in Rosh Chodesh you have a carbon chatas of a cow. Chitesa, it's a carbon chatas. The cow is a carbon chatas. Oilihi, isn't it a carbon oila? Because the Torah tells you that parim b'nei v'koshnaiva, these are oilers, right? These are all oila reif michoech. The cow is an oila, not a chatas. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, okay, Yecheskel has problems. Parsha Zu Eliyahu Asar L'Darsha. We're going to have to wait till Eliyahu Navi comes to explain to us Sefer Yecheskel. Rav Ashi Amar, no. Rav Ashi says that you don't need Eliyahu to tell you that. Milu mekrivu b'mei Ezer k'derech shekrivu b'mei Moshe. In other words, that Yecheskel was telling a prophecy that when they're going to build the second base of Mikdash, they're going to bring a cow for a carbon chatas, just like when Moshe Rabbeinu inaugurated the Mishkan. The Torah tells you he brought an egel for a chatas, so also they're going to bring a par for a chatas when they inaugurate the second base of Mikdash. And that's what Yecheskel meant. Not every Rosh Chodesh you're going to bring a par for a carbon chatas. In fact, I think you bring a seir for a carbon chatas on a Rosh Chodesh. Tanyanami Achi Yehuda Parsha Zu Eliyahu Asla Darsham. Yehuda said, "This parsha I need Eliyahu and Navi to tell me what's going on here." Amalei Rabbi Yossi Meluim Hikriva b'mei Ezek Kederach Shekriva b'mei Moshe. And Rabbi Yossi said exactly that they're going to bring an egel, like a cow, for a carbon chatas when they build the second temple. That's what Yecheskel meant. Amalai, so Yehuda was so proud of Rabbi Yossi explaining him. He gave him a blessing. Your mind should be relaxed, just like because you relaxed my mind. I was so nervous on understanding this passage. Now the Gemara is going to tell us there are other strange psukim in Yecheskel that make absolutely no sense. The Torah tells you that the Yecheskel tells us the chol nevela treifim in oifen behemel lo yochlu hakahanim. A nevela and a kohen is not allowed to eat a nevela. Says the Gemara, so doesn't mean that a kohen is not allowed to eat a nevela. Only a yid is allowed to eat a nevela. What did Yecheskel mean? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Parsha Zu Eliyahu Asar L'Darsha. It makes no sense. You need Eliyahu Novi to explain it. Ravina Amar, no. Kahanim Itzrachalei. Yecheskel told us a chiddush. Sal Kadaita Chamina, I would have thought, Kahanim, Hoil the Ishtru Malika L'Gabayu, since in the Beis Hamikdash, if they do Malika, they're allowed to eat on a bird, they're allowed to eat it in the Beis Hamikdash. Tishru Namin Nevel Treifa. So if they do Malika on a chulin bird, I would think they're also allowed to eat it. Kamash Malon, that's why a coin it has to be is warned not to eat nevela outside the Beis Hamikdash. Only Kachim is allowed to eat malika, because and that's only a unique type of killing an animal, which applies only in the Beis Hamikdash, where you're using the back of your nail, not a regular knife. Then Yecheskel says, "V'chein tasa b'shiva b'chodesh v'ish shoyge u'mpese b'chiparta masaboyas." Shiva, Rabbi Yochanan. This part of Yecheskel is talking about the par helam davar shel tzibar. And what is Yecheskel saying? Yecheskel saying, Rabbi Yochanan, Elu shiva shvatim shchatim. You have 7 shvatim that did an avera. Let's say they ate chalev. Va'afal pisha ein ruba shel kahal. Even though they're not the most of the population of Klal Yisrael, maybe they represent, those 7 shvatim represent 35% of Klal Yisrael, you'll still bring 1 par helam davar shel tzibar. Not everybody brings their own carbon chatas. Chodesh, what does it mean, chodesh, in that pasuk? It's only a type of din that they said an Issachar is mutter. Let's say the Bezdin of the 7 Shvatim said, oh, everybody's allowed to eat chaylev. It teaches you that the only time everybody, it could be yotzei, so to speak, with a par helam davar shel tzibor, is only if everybody didn't know that chaylev is also, they relied on the Bezdin and they ate chaylev. That's when you bring a par helam davar shel tzibor. Okay, what you do see, the Gemara just got through that there's few psukim in Yecheskel that make absolutely no sense. And they needed to come to terms with it. Amar Yehuda Marav, Zachor Isa Yishal Tayv, Chanina Mechiski Yishmai, Shil Malihu, Nigna Zevi Yechaskel. Shoy Dvarim Saisim Divrei Torah. Hananya ben Chuskia, if it wasn't for him, they would have taken Yosef Yecheskel and not made it part of the canon, because it seems to contradict the words of the Torah. So now also, what did Hananya ben Yecheskia do? He brought 300 barrels of oil, and he started figuring out a pshat in these psukim so we can keep Sefer Yecheskel in the canon. Tanarabanan, Amar Rab Shimon, Ibhoyel Empara Merubim, Tanarabam, Eifel Apar, Eifel Ail, Yasam Michel Lekvasim Kasha Tasi Yolim Shemen Hil Eifel. The pasuk in Yecheskel says that you should bring for every cow and every sheep, you bring an ephah, and for the ram on Rosh Chodesh. Now, but that's not true, because the Chumash says on Rosh Chodesh, for the mincha, for the cow, you bring shloisha esroinim, okay? For the ayil, you bring 2 esroinim, and 1 isar and 1 pound of flour for a sheep. So how does he say it's ephah, the ephah, the ephah? It's all the same measurement. Are they all the same measurement? Ella, what the Cheskel is saying is what Reb Shimon wanted to say. If there was a lot of cows, but they didn't buy flour, then they should bring at least 1 cow with its nesachim, with its flour. Just don't bring cows without the flour. We go to Amud Beis, Merubim. If you didn't have their din of flowers, and each one had their own measurement, you have to do one thing right. Bring the 1 ram and its meal offering. Don't just buy rams and then not have money left over to buy flour. So you have to do it right. Okay, now basically, let's try to do the Mishnah. Again, we saw that. Let's just read the psukim by the Shtei HaLechem. Okay, remember by the Shtei HaLechem, they made these 2 big challahs, and then they brought carbon oilus, right? 7 sheeps for a carbon sheep, and 1 cow and 2 rams, and then they brought 2 extra sheeps for a shlamim. The meat went halfway on the mizbeach, the fats went on the mizbeach, and the rest of the meat was distributed amongst the kahanim. And same thing with the bread, the chametz bread. And it's not like a regular shlamim that was eaten for 2 days and 1 night. They had to eat it that day of Shavuos and the night after, and then it becomes possible. So the Mishnah says, what is the par v'elim v'aksamim v'aksair eimakvenes alechem? If you could only afford, if the Beis Hamikdash could only buy the cow, the rams, and the sheep, and the goat, and they can't afford the bread, they can't find the bread, that's fine. Bring those oilers. And if you just find the bread and you can't find animals, bring the bread. Then just distribute the bread for the kahanim. But halechem, according to Rabbi Kiva, halechem, if you're missing the bread, ma'akev es hakvasim, that stops you from bringing the 2 sheeps. In other words, the 2 sheeps for shlamim, if you don't have a bread, don't bring the shlamim. Because the absolute one is the bread, according to Rabbi Akiva. But if you're missing sheeps, you could still distribute the breads to the kahanim. Divri Rabbi Akiva. In other words, Rabbi Akiva holds that the absolute thing is you must have breads. Again, what was the point of all the Shtei HaLechem? By the way, I assumed you knew. The point is that they had the Shtei HaLechem, which allowed the new crop to be brought as flour offerings to the Beis Hamikdash, whereas Chadash is permitted, let's say, for outside the Beis Hamikdash on the 2nd day of Pesach, right? But for the Beis Hamikdash, you have to wait till Shavuos, and they brought the Shtei HaLechem karbanos, and then you, from now on, you can bring meal offerings from the new crop. So the most important thing is the breads. Reb Shimon ben Namis says, "Loy, not so. Ki ela kvasim akven salechem, va'alechem enim akav es kvasim." The main thing is the sheeps, not the breads. The bread is the sheep is the most important, and therefore, if you don't have the bread, you can still bring the sheeps as carbon shlamim. Shekei metzinik shayisrael b'midbar mem shana karvu kvasim b'leilechem. Shimon ben Namis makes a great argument. This parsha of Emor was written while the Jews were in the desert, right? And yet there was no breads there. There was nothing growing in the desert. This thing of bringing from the new crop only applies when you go into the base, when you come to Eretz Yisrael. And yet they were bringing the sheep without the breads in the midbar. Afkan, in the case of emergency, yikavu kvasim b'lei lechem. So from now on, the most important is the sheep, not the bread. Rab Shimon says, Hachalacha kedivrei bananas. I agree with bananas. Aval ein atam kedvar, but I don't exactly hold of his reason. Shekol Amar b'chubishbikudem karba midbar. I agree that everything that's written in the musafs of Shavuos, taka was brought in the desert. The truth is, the Shtei Alechem karbanos were not brought in the midbar. Mishabol Aretz, when they came to Eretz Israel, Karvu Elu Elu. That's when they started bringing the Shtei Alechem karbanos. But until they came to Eretz Israel, they never brought it. But if I agree with Rab Shimon ben Anas, why is the sheep the most important? Why do I hold you bring the sheep without the breads? So Rab Shimon says, we're going to stop over here. The sheep, as soon as you shech the sheep, the shlomim sleeps, you can eat it. I mean, there's nothing stopping you. But what's going to permit you to eat the bread if you don't have sheep? You know, what makes the bread special is because you're bringing a carbon shlomim, and now you make it holy, those breads, and now those breads, in fact, you're supposed to lift the breads together with the sheep. So, and when you shech the sheep, now the breads become mutter for the kahanim to eat. But if you're not going to have sheep, then how are you going to eat the bread? So therefore, according to Reb Shimon and Reb Shimon ben Anas, the sheep is the most important thing. And if you don't have the sheep, don't eat the bread. And if you don't have the bread, you can be makriv the sheep. And that's how the machlokes. So the Gemara continues and says like this: Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, "V'kraftem al alechem, koiva al alechem." The pasuk says, "V'krafta al alechem." Again, by the shtei alechem, you bring for the sake of the breads, 7 sheep for an oila, 1 cow, two rams. You oila Hashem. So the choiva al alechem, shivas kvasim timimim afal pin shein lechem. Because since the Torah didn't say v'kraftem shivas kvasim al halechem, but it says v'kraftem al halechem first, and then it says shivas kvasim. So even though you don't have breads, you could still bring those carbon oilers. In Mata, and that's what the Mishnah said. All these things, if if you now don't have the breads, you could still bring the param elim and kvasim. So now malamish is so what in came matam al lechem. So if they're not stopping each other, what does the Torah says? You makar of oilers only for the sake of the breads. Malamed, this teaches you they never obligated to bring sheeps before they got obligated to bring breads, and the only time they got obligated to bring breads was when they got into Eretz Yisrael. So as long as they didn't enter Eretz Yisrael, this whole Shtei Alechem group of karbanos is not relevant. Says the right. So Yochel, hey, we're going to skip that. Rabbi Yochel, hey, kvasim amurim kan heinen kvasim amurim b'chumash b'kudim. I would think that the sheeps that are written in Parshas Emor is the same thing musaf in b'chumash b'kudim. So we say not so. Amret kishatim yiyeh it's a param be'elim ein heim. It's not the same thing. Elalola boim beglal atzman v'alola boim beglal lechem. One is musaf and one because of the bread. Nimsa masha amma b'chumash b'kudim kara b'midbar masha amma b'taris kanim le'kara b'midbar. The musafs were brought in the desert, but the Shtei Alechem karbanos were not brought in the desert. They were only brought when they got to Eretz Yisrael. And you could even see it because here by the Shtei Alechem oilers it says 1 cow, 2 rams. By the Musaf in Parshas Pinchas it says 2 cows, 1 ram. So it's obviously different. Says the Gemara. Maybe you're right. The cows and the rams are different, but maybe it's the same sheep. So you don't have to bring 14 sheep. So you could bring 7 sheep, 1 for the musaf, and that same 7 sheep will be for the Shtei Alechem. So the Gemara says, since the param and elam are not the same, so also the sheep are not the same. Even though they're the same number, still the Torah is telling you bring seven different sheep for each group. How do you know the param and the elim are different? Maybe this is what the Torah is saying. If you want, bring one cow and two rams. And if you want, bring two cows and one ram. How do you know they're different? It seems the Torah is giving you the same karbonis. First, the Torah says bring seven sheep. So the seven sheep are equal to each other. And then the Torah switches around. By the Musaf, it's two cows, one ram. And by the Shtei Lechem, the Torah says one cow, two rams. Maybe the Torah is telling you either or. You pick your number of cows and rams you want to do. And it says the Gemara, if you look at the pasuk closely, by the Musaf, it says parim first and then ayil. But then by here, by the Shtei Lechem in Parshas Emor, it says par first and then ayil and then sheeps. So it's the order is different. Here, let's see. It's Yom HaBikurim. It says parim, ayil, and then sheeps. And here it says parim, ayil. That's to say, if first it says sheeps, parim, and ayil. So the order is different. There must be, this is a new type of carbonus that was specific, an additional carbon to the musaf that was brought in honor of the Shtei Lechem. Says the Gemara, and we'll finish to the end. Halechem akav is a kvasa. By time the Rabbi Kiva. Why did Rabbi Kiva hold that the absolute is the bread? Gamayiu tiana malahal lechem avkan lechem. Here in the Torah it says, yiu, right? This is yiu. These are absolute. What is it referring to? So if you refer this yiu to tiena is definitely referring to lechem. So we'll say that this yiu, to say that it's absolute, referring to the bread. And this is Rabbi Kiva's opinion. Rabbi Shimon ben Anas's opinion, yiu will be compared to other kvasim, the oila kvasim, where it also says the word yiu. So I'll compare it to this yiu. That's the opinion of Reb Shimon ben Anas that tells you it's absolute. This yiu tells you it's absolute. And it's what it's referring to? Sheeps, but not these sheeps. It probably is going to refer to the sheeps of the Shlamim. Comes along Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva says, no, yiu goes to tiena. We draw a line from yiu to tiena. The what's absolute? The breads, which are chametz breads. That's the absolute. So the Gemara says like this. By time of the Rabbi Kiva, Gama Yiyu Mitienu, Malahan Lechem, Afkan Lechem. Benanas, Gama Yiyu, Malahan Kvasim, Afkan Kvasim. Ubenanas name Nelab Mitiena. Bananas should learn from Tiena. Malahan Lechem, Afkan Lechem, like Rabbi Kiva learned. Done in Yiyu Miyu, being done in Yiyu Mitiena. Bananas has a problem with Rabbi Kiva's drasha because Yiyu and Tiena are different words. Says the Gemara. So how can you make a drasha? As a drasha, or ma nafkamina. What's the difference? Hatana the Beishmov Shavakayim Valkayim Zel Shiva Zel Bia. That sometimes, even if the words are not exact, you could learn one from the other. So the Gemara says, when I have nothing to compare it to, then you do the best you can. But here I have something better, says Bananas. I don't know what the Torah means. Kodesh Yiu Hashem L'Kohen. It should be absolute. Absolute. It always has to be there. So, but I could say that Yiu means the Yiu of animals. So the animal has to be there. Which animal? The Shlomim animal. So that's the way Bananas learns, because to say that it refers to the breads, that's a stretch. Yiu to Tiano is a stretch. It's not the same words. Rab Kiva namin leilach yiu miyu. So didn't Bananas just make perfect sense? And says the Gemara, the yiu that Bananas is referring to is not the same sheep of Shlamims. It's the oilas. So that's not a gift for the kohen. That only belongs to Hashem. We're trying to say what's absolute. The Torah told you in this pasuk, v'heinif, the bread, and you have the two sheeps. One of them is absolute. This pasuk, this last pasuk, this is the key. The last pasuk says that the bread and the two sheeps go together. One of them is absolute. The yiyu, that's the absolute. So it cannot refer to sheeps because according to Rabbi Akiva, those yiyu, that the other yiyu is referring to sheeps that were brought for carbon oilers, not the shlamim shleeps. So yiyu must be referring to tiena, which refers to the bread. And the Torah is telling you that the bread is absolute. That's what Rabbi Akiva says. By Sema, and if you want, I could say, forget all this. Bekra gufe kome palgi, koydishil shem koyim. Rabbi Akiva, the Torah tells you that one of them, it's absolute. Rabbi Akiva Sava, Ezeh Dava Shekula Kaim. What goes only to the Kaim? The bread or the shlamim? Heavy oimer zeh lechem. It's the bread, because the bread has nothing on the mizbeach. It's chametz. But the meat is partly on the mizbeach. The emerim go on the mizbeach, and the meat is eaten by the kahanim. So that's not to the Kaim. Ubenanas miksiv kodesh yiyul kaim. Does it say it's absolute? Whatever is going to the Kohen, Kodesh Yul Hashem la Kohen Ksiv, Ezeu Davash Miktsas Hashem Miktsas the Kohen, which is partly to the Eibishtem, partly to a Kohen. Heavy Omer Eliklosim. This refers to sheep. So Benana says that Kodesh Yul Hashem la Kohen, that end pasuk. See, we're not learning it anymore from before. We're learning for this pasuk, and the Torah tells you something is absolute. Right? This pasuk tells you it's absolute. Kodesh Yil Hashem LeKohen, Benana says, what's absolute? Something that goes to the Eibishter, to the Kohen. That is the sheep. Part of it goes to the Eibishter, the Emerim, and part of it is eaten by the Kohen. Rabbi Akiva will say, Miksiv Kodesh Yil Hashem Vila Kohen. The absolute thing belongs to the Eibishter and to the Kohen. You're right. Lashem LeKohen. It's only to the Kohen, but Hashem gave it to a Kohen. And what is that? It must be referring to the breads. Rav Kahuna, like Rav Huna explained. Rav Huna, Kane Hashem. Hashem owns the bread. When the son of the Kohen and gave it to the Kahanim to eat. So it's only referring to the Shtei Alechem, and only that is the absolute, that's Ma'akev. And that explains the machlekes between Rabbi Akiva and Benanas.